Have you ever known someone who, well, talks a really good game, but maybe doesn't quite have the follow through?
Yeah, sure.
Imagine that. But on a spiritual level, we're talking Vedic philosophy here, and specifically the kind of dangers of saying you're a pure devotee, a real master, when maybe you're still learning the ropes.
Yeah, that cuts right to the core, doesn't it? Authenticity on the spiritual path. And looking at your notes here, they're really full of insights on the karmic consequences, the whole guru-disciple dynamic,
Right.
and this really fascinating angle on how truly advanced devotees perceive suffering. It's quite different.
Exactly. So that's our mission for this deep dive. We really want to get into why being genuine matters so much in Vedic practice. How does it, affect your karma? And also explore this really unique way pure devotees handle hardship. Okay, let's jump in. This whole idea of like pretending to be a pure devotee when you're not quite there yet, why is that such a big deal?
Well, in Vedic thought, there's this concept called adhikara. You can think of it as your qualification, your level of spiritual readiness.
Right.
So to claim you're an Uttama Adhikari, that's the highest level when you're actually still a Kanishta Adhikari, a beginner, that's seen as a serious offense
An offense. Why?
because it fundamentally violates humility. And humility is just, well, absolutely essential for making any real spiritual progress. Texts like the Bhagavad Gita, the Vishnu Purana, they're pretty explicit about warning against hypocrisy, which they call dambha.
Huh. So it's more than just maybe being a bit overly enthusiastic. There are actual, like, real-world consequences.
Yeah, absolutely. Think about it, that disconnect, claiming one thing externally but being something else internally, that immediately starts generating what's called prarabdha karma.
It's Rob the karma. That's the
Exactly.
karma playing out in this life, right?
Exactly, the immediate stuff. And it can manifest in all sorts of ways. Mental struggles, emotional turmoil, maybe even conflicts with people around you, because fundamentally you're misrepresenting spiritual truth, potentially misleading others.
And longer term. Because
Yeah.
karma isn't always instant, is it?
No, definitely not. Over the long haul, this kind of persistent inauthenticity, the karmic debt it builds up, it
Yeah.
can really deepen your entanglement in samsara.
The cycle of birth and death.
Right. It creates these patterns that make it harder and harder to break free, life after life.
Wow. That's pretty heavy for something that might just start as wanting to seem more advanced. Okay, let's shift focus a bit to the guru-disciple relationship. Your notes get into some really interesting karmic stuff here, especially around the guru's qualifications.
Yes, that relationship is deeply karmic. And a really critical factor is the guru's own adhikara. Are they genuinely qualified? Are they a Shuddha Vaishnava, a truly pure devotee capable of guiding someone?
And what happens if they're not? If you have what your notes call a false guru, what's the karmic load there for them and for their followers?
Well, for the guru acting without that genuine realization, they accumulate significant negative karma, new sins or papa,
No.
things like deceitfulness, shathya, and acting out of false pride, dampa.
Yeah.
And these actions, they lead directly to their own suffering and keep them bound in that cycle of samsara.
So they're kind of digging their own hole deeper. But what about the disciples, the people who trust them?
That's where it gets really serious. A guru who isn't genuinely realized lacks the spiritual potency, the shakti, to actually process or absorb the disciples' karma.
So they can't help lighten the load.
Worse, they can actually end up amplifying the collective suffering. And furthermore, disciples following an unqualified guru might commit guru aparadha offenses against the guru position itself, which sadly just makes their own karmic situation worse.
Wow, so it's like a negative feedback loop almost, a double whammy. Your notes mention Srila Prabhupada observing how unqualified disciples could even disturb a guru.
Exactly. It really underscores how delicate that balance is and the potential for, serious negative karmic fallout when the guidance isn't authentic.
Okay, so we've seen the potential problems. Let's flip it. What about when the guru is a pure devotee? How does the karma work then? Your notes mention transcendental suffering, which sounds paradoxical.
It does, but it's a key distinction. Pure devotees, the Uttama Adhikaris, they operate, you could say, beyond the normal laws of karma. Now, they might still experience residual prarabdha karma playing out.
So like illness or physical discomfort.
Exactly. Things that look like suffering from the outside, but crucially, they remain detached. They don't identify with it in the same way, and they often see it as Krishna's mercy.
Mercy. How can suffering be mercy? That's counterintuitive for most of us.
Right. But for them, it's not punishment. It can actually be purposeful, and maybe pedagogical, like a teaching moment.
Mhm.
You mentioned Srila Prabhupada's heart attack earlier. His followers didn't see that as karmic retribution,
They saw it as a lesson.
a lesson in tolerance, in staying fixed in devotion even under extreme duress. Powerful example for everyone. And importantly, pure devotees don't generate new negative karma. So what might appear as suffering, sometimes it's even called Leela, like a divine play.
Uh-huh.
It's actually meant to inspire devotion in others, not a result of their own past misdeeds.
So that's a completely different framework. Your notes had a table comparing the false guru and the pure devotee on this point.
Hmm.
Could you sort of walk us through the main differences?
Sure, so if you compare them, the source of suffering is different. For the false guru, it's their own accumulated sins, plus maybe the weight of disciples' karma they can't handle. For the pure devotee, it's either that residual prarabdha or it serves a specific divine purpose. Then the spiritual impact. The false guru gets further entangled in samsara. The pure devotee, they're liberated, detached.
Big difference.
Huge. And finally, the role of the disciples. With a false guru, disciples might inadvertently add to the suffering through offenses. With a pure devotee, disciples are typically inspired by their guru's endurance and faith.
Okay, that really clarifies the contrast. Let's zoom in now on the specific fallout for someone who claims spiritual authority they haven't actually earned. What are the consequences spiritually, socially?
Yeah, the ripples spread out, spiritually and karmically. Claiming unearned authority displeases the divine. It violates dharma, righteous conduct, because it stems from spiritual pride, hypocrisy.
And that brings immediate karma.
Often, yes. That prabdharma we talked about can manifest as suffering, obstacles, difficulties in life, and it actually hinders their own spiritual progress, diminishing any real spiritual potency they might otherwise develop.
And it doesn't start with just them.
Right.
It affects the community.
Absolutely. Socially, it's a big problem. Misleading others spiritually causes real harm, potentially creating collective karmic entanglement. You see warnings about this in ancient texts like the Mahabharata and from later teachers like Bhaktivinoda Thakura and Bhaktisiddhanta Sarasvati.
So it's a serious offense against the tradition, too.
Definitely. It brings dishonor to the lineage, the parampara, and constitutes various offenses or aparadas.
And what's going on inside the person doing this, psychologically?
Internally, there's often a lot of disruption. Guilt, maybe anxiety, a lack of real peace because, their outer persona doesn't match their inner reality. And socially, this inconsistency eventually erodes trust. People sense it and respect is lost within the community.
It sounds like a very precarious way to live. Now, one of the most fascinating parts of your notes is how a pure devotee actually experiences pain. It seems very different from, well, how most of us do.
It really is. Now, both pure devotees and, let's say, developing devotees feel physical and emotional pain. That's human. A pure devotee definitely feels it. Srila Prabhupada himself confirmed feeling pain during his heart attack.
Okay, so they feel it physically.
Yes, but the crucial difference is their reaction, their internal state. They remain detached, equipoise, balanced. They continue their service, their devotion, regardless of the body's condition.
So the pain is there, but it doesn't derail them. It doesn't throw them off balance internally.
Because they often perceive that suffering not as punishment, but as Krishna's mercy, or maybe an opportunity to practice tolerance. There's often a sense of gratitude, actually feeling they deserve much worse for past actions, and Krishna is being kind.
Gratitude for pain, that's hard to grasp.
It is, unless you understand their identification isn't primarily with the body. It's with the soul. So the pain doesn't dominate their consciousness. Their mind stays calm, focused on the divine. They see it as a chance for spiritual growth. And yeah, this calmness in the face of adversity often really surprises people around them.
It's a powerful image. And how does that contrast with someone who isn't a pure devotee? How do they typically react to pain?
Well, for someone still developing, pain and pleasure too actually tends to be much more disturbing. Suffering often brings bewilderment, resentment, maybe a feeling of being victimized.
Seeing it as an obstacle or punishment.
Right. Without that deep spiritual grounding, it feels like an obstacle to happiness or direct retribution. This can lead to lamentation, fear, anxiety. Their mind is much more easily agitated because their identity is more tied to the body and mind. Pain can really take over their thoughts and feelings.
It's such a stark difference. Again, your notes had a table summarizing this. Can you hit the key points?
Sure. So feels pain, yes, for both. Reaction. Pure devotee. Equipoised, grateful, non-pure, disturbed, resentful, view of suffering. Pure devotee sees it as mercy, growth. Non-pure sees it as an obstacle, punishment. Identification. Pure devotee identifies with the soul, non-pure more with the body-mind, and mental state. Pure devotee stays calm, focused. Non-pure tends to be troubled, anxious.
That really drives home how transformative pure devotion is. Now, this idea of feeling pain but being undisturbed,
Mhm.
are there specific scriptural examples or commentaries that actually describe this? It sounds almost, well, contradictory.
Yes, definitely. The scriptures and commentaries do address this. There's a well-known verse in the Srimad Bhagavatam 10.1.8 spoken by Lord Brahma.
Right.
It talks about how a devotee patiently tolerates the reactions of their past karma, waits for Krishna's mercy, and keeps offering respects. This makes them eligible for liberation, and Srila Prabhupada's commentary on this is key.
What do you say?
He explains that devotees see suffering as Krishna's mercy, and because they're not creating new bad karma, the reactions they experience are actually minimized. They just tolerate them.
So it's tied to their understanding of karma and mercy.
Exactly. And then you have the Bhagavad Gita, verse 12.1 fame, describing the ideal devotee as Samaduka Sukha, equal in happiness and distress. Undisturbed.
Yep.
We already mentioned Srila Prabhupada's own example. With his heart attack, feeling the pain, but seeing it as Krishna's arrangement, not a karmic hit. And think of Queen Kunti praying for more adversity so she'd always remember Krishna.
Wow. That's devotion.
It is. So yes, the scriptures confirm they feel pain, but their realization, their consciousness, completely changes their perception and reaction. They remain undisturbed, see it as mercy and opportunity.
Which brings us to maybe the final big question here. How do pure devotees reconcile suffering with their deep love for Krishna? On the surface, it seems like there could be a tension there.
They reconcile it through that very lens of understanding we've been discussing. They see it fundamentally as Krishna's mercy and an opportunity for growth.
How so? Mercy how?
They understand that any suffering is actually Krishna helping them burn off remaining past karmic reactions quickly, purifying them faster. You know the analogy of a fan spinning down after you turn it off?
There's residual momentum.
Yeah, exactly. The karma is just playing out. So seeing it this way allows for acceptance and patience. That Bhagavatam verse, again, tolerating suffering while serving Krishna, leads to liberation.
So acceptance is key.
Acceptance, patience, and keeping their focus squarely on Krishna. They derive their real happiness, their bliss, from that devotional connection, which isn't dependent on external circumstances. Why? Because their identity is rooted in the soul, not the temporary body.
They trust Krishna's plan, essentially.
They have deep faith that Krishna is always protecting their spiritual progress, that whatever happens is ultimately for their highest good, even if it involves temporary discomfort.
So to sum it up, they reframe suffering completely. It becomes mercy, purification, a chance to deepen devotion, and they respond with patience, gratitude, and focus.
That's it in a nutshell, yes.
Well, this has been incredibly insightful. We've really dug into the serious karmic risks of spiritual faking it, you could say, and the huge difference between a true and a false guru regarding karma, and then this amazing transformative way pure devotees view suffering.
It really highlights how crucial authenticity is, isn't it? And how much our inner perspective, our consciousness, can shape our experience of life's challenges.
Absolutely. And maybe that leads to a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. Think about authenticity in your own life, whatever you're pursuing. How might shifting your perspective change how you deal with challenges? What does genuine qualification really mean, not just spiritually, but in any field? And what are the hidden costs, maybe, of pretending for you and for others? Something to mull over after this deep dive.